Hello. If this is your first time joining me at What's Her Problem, my name is Deborah Raphson, and every Friday I tackle an issue at the heart of chronic illness and disability through personal essays, interviews, opinion pieces, and more. If you are a regular reader or listener, thank you for your continued support and welcome back to the What's Her Problem interview series. Last fall, I kicked off the interview series with a fantastic conversation with accessibility expert and disability justice advocate Sarah Hom. We talked about inclusion for theater patrons and employees. This year, I've spoken to Lisa Salberg, founder and CEO of the Hypertrophic Cardiomyopathy Association, as well as Dr. Wendy Trubeau, functional medicine physician and author of Dirty Girl: Ditch the Toxins, Look Great, and Feel Freaking Amazing. I hope you'll go back to the archive on Substack or to YouTube and check those out if you haven't had a chance to see them yet. Today, I am really pleased to welcome my next interview series guest, Jennifer Crystal. We will be tackling the issue that one tick stopped the clock for this Lyme disease warrior who advocates for others with chronic illness and uses writing to heal. One Tick Stopped the Clock is the name of Jen's second book, which was published in the fall of 2024. It was the winner of the 2025 Independent Publishers of New England Silver Award in Creative Nonfiction. Jennifer Crystal is an author, educator, and writing coach who is passionate about the transformative power of personal narrative. She runs the Writing to Heal program at Grub Street Creative Writing Center and also runs monthly creative writing meetups for Health Story Collaborative. For more than a decade, she has been a weekly columnist for the Global Lyme Alliance, and her work on Lyme and other long-haul illnesses has been published in the Boston Globe, Eon's Psyche, WBUR's Cognoscenti, and many other outlets. She is a senior writer and patient experience representative at Harvard Health Publishing. Now, without further ado, please welcome Jennifer Crystal. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Deb. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Full disclosure to everyone who's watching or listening, Jen and I have actually known each other since 1996 because we have a very close mutual friend. But this is the first time we've had an opportunity to talk at length since I finished reading One Tick Stopped the Clock. So the first thing that I want to say is congratulations. Um, I know that you worked so hard on this and how meaningful it is for you to have this out into the world. I cried multiple times while I was reading it, even though I knew the basic gist of your story beforehand, because I think the specifics of your journey with Lyme disease just really hit home for me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of that. I'm sorry I made you cry, but I appreciate that it evoked emotion like that, and I appreciate just, your understanding of the book. So thank you.
Of course. One of the first things that we see in One Tick Stop the Clock is the dedication page. And on it, you write, "For the patients who need to be heard, I believe you." Why was it important for you for that to be the book's dedication?
So my book is really, it's about my journey with Lyme and other tick-borne illness, as well as chronic active Epstein-Barr virus. But I wanted it to speak for all chronic illness patients, whatever the illness may be. And I think a common thread, unfortunately, for those patients is oftentimes not being heard for a while and going through a series of misdiagnoses or being told that they're fine, that their labs are normal, that maybe it's all in their head, maybe they're just stressed, they're just run down. And a lot of these patients I know from personal experience and from speaking with them just feel like they're shouting their story and they're not being heard and they're not being validated. And I came to understand how important it is for someone to be heard and for someone to be validated and for someone to be believed about their account of their own body. No one knows your body better than you do. And so I wanted people to know from the outset that I hear you and I believe you, and that is where my story is coming from.
I wonder, this is something I think about a lot, and maybe this is too big for us to tackle, but this seems like such a universal experience, right? I even just this week I finished an advocacy training program for a group called Women Heart, and there were 40 of us in the program, and almost every single woman in this program had a similar story about the challenges of being heard and believed. And what can we do about it? Does this have to do with medical school education? Does it have to do with men not believing women? Is it some other thing that I'm not thinking of? When you think about it, what can we do to change things?
It's a really good question, and I wish there was a quick answer for it. But I think, just even the things that you suggested. So, first of all, in medical school education, I think including narrative medicine in all medical school education so that doctors are really focusing on the patient story, hearing the patient story, taking that story into account. There's research that's been done about how quickly doctors can cut off a patient because they're given often 15 minutes for an appointment history diagnosis. And so as soon as they hear one symptom, they're already down a track of what this patient might have or might not have. And they may not be hearing the rest of the story. And that may not be completely their fault. It may be part of a larger systemic issue with insurance that they don't have time to hear that whole story. But if, doctors can get trained in narrative medicine, which is really, listening to the patient's story and having the patient's story be at the root of care, and figuring out ways to fold that in even into a short appointment, I think that would be really helpful. I do think that, or know from the research, that it is more of a problem for women not being heard. Laurie Edwards, who you may know as an author, she wrote In the Kingdom of the Sick and Life Disrupted, dealing with chronic illness in your 20s and 30s. She's done a lot of research on this and written some New York Times and Boston Globe op-eds about this. Um, One of her pieces, I believe, was called Why Are We Still Dismissing Girls' Pain? And she's really talked about the research behind that of how, um, you know, back in the day, women were written off as hysterical. And that was a diagnosis. And I think to this day, women are trying to be loud about their stories, which may seem hysterical, but because they're not being heard. But it happens to men too. Yeah, I think we really just need to find ways. First of all, for patients also to be able to tell their story in a concise manner that focuses on the symptoms that they really do need to be heard also. So it could, like narrative medicine goes both ways also in when a patient's been living with something for years and has been dismissed by so many doctors and they're going to their 40th doctor's appointment, they're naturally going to come into that appointment feeling defensive, wanting to share the whole story, and there isn't time for that. And so, you know, if there could be training on both sides, actually, of how doctors and patients can best participate in collaborative care, I think that would really be helpful.
Yeah, and to those points, I mentioned in your bio in the introduction that you work with Health Story Collaborative, and the folks over there, I believe, teach the narrative medicine courses at Harvard Medical School, and it's been interesting to learn about that programming. And I attended one of their events last year where they had the patients. Three patients who had, various medical experiences work with three of the doctors in training through that program, and then they collaborated on presenting that patient's story, and, with the goal of the doctors or doctors in training having to listen really closely to bring out the salient points in the patient's story. And I just thought that was really effective. And so it's nice to see that some places are incorporating that kind of training. And one of the other things you mentioned was Life Disrupted and Laurie Edwards, her book. And I that was one of the things from One Tick Stop the Clock that really stood out to me was the influence that you finding that book had on your journey as well.
Yes, it was life-changing for me. Yeah, I don't know if you want me to tell that story now or you want us to get into it or
Well, let's come back to that. I'm gonna
yeah.
actually have you read from an earlier section of One Tick Stop the Clock. despite all of the challenges of being heard and seen and believed, we've also both had experiences where we've found the right doctor that can make all the difference. And, the ones who take you seriously, who appreciate how well educated you might be as a patient, rather than seeing it as a negative. And, for me, it's always when that kind of thing happens, it feels like a little light bulb is turning on when a piece of a diagnosis can finally click. So, I would love for you to read a passage in that vein from the book, starting on page 57 with one January morning. And if you can do a little bit of setup for people who haven't read the book yet, and I'm sure they will once they hear some of it. But how did you get to this point in the story?
Sure. So at this point in the story, I'm 2 years into being bedridden and ill. I had been, after I graduated from college, I had moved out to Colorado to be a ski instructor, a teacher and a ski instructor. That had always been my dream. And I had been living out there and had been dealing with a number of unexplained idiopathic, seemingly idiopathic symptoms since my sophomore year of college, shortly after I met you, Deb. And did not know at the time that they were the result of a tick bite and tick-borne illness. So at this point in the story, I had gotten mono 2 years earlier, at the end of my second year in Colorado, and was not able to get over it. It turned into chronic active Epstein-Barr virus, and I became completely bedridden. And ended up having to give up my life in Colorado, my independence, my ability to work, and move back with my parents in Connecticut, where I had grown up. And for 2 years, we had been trying to figure out what was wrong. We knew I had Epstein-Barr virus. That was an accurate diagnosis. But I actually had been fighting so hard for people to believe the Epstein-Barr that I hadn't really considered there could be something additional going on, because I was not getting better from the EBV. So this point that we're at is about 2 years into that journey of living at home in Connecticut.
Right.